Anywhere you put 30,000 cows on 50 acres of ground or 50,000 chickens on 10 acres of ground, you're going to have issues.
If good management practices aren't followed, waste could flow downstream into Lower Roaring River.
There's a lot of contaminated water already in Missouri.
We have no doubt that there is going to be a long-term tainting of that aquifer.
We don't live on a frontier anymore. There aren't vast unlimited supplies of resources, and we all live downstream.
In the Ozarks, water flows everywhere. Spring-fed streams run through the valleys that characterize the region. The importance of fresh water cannot be overemphasized. Where it is abundant, life thrives. Of all the water on planet Earth, only 1.6% is available as fresh water. This is the water that our fish swim in. This is the water that nourishes our land and wildlife. This is the water we drink and refresh ourselves with. Without this fresh, bountiful supply, life as we know it would not exist. Roaring River State Park is located south of Cassville, near the Arkansas border. Nestled into the rolling Ozark countryside, the park offers opportunities for families to spend time away from the stress of our hectic lifestyle. Some see fishing as the park's main attraction, as it is known as a premier trout fishing destination. Every year, around 3,000 people line up along the banks of Roaring River during the opening day of fishing season, hoping to catch that perfect lunker.
We raise and stock about $280,000 a year for the park, and we stock every single night of the season, which is March 1 through October 31. And we also maintain the winter fishing, which is catch and release only weekends. So the hatchery is responsible for the trout, and it really brings in a lot of revenue for the area. There certainly are a lot of other things, like the trails and nature center and camping, and it would be a beautiful place to come to without the trout fishing. But I think the trout probably attracts more people than anything. It certainly wouldn't be as heavily visited place if it wasn't for the trout fishing. It's been going on for so long, since more than 70 years. So it worked its way into the tradition of the area and the state and that sort of thing.
We get a lot of families that come back year after year after year after year. Some of these families have been coming here for 40, 45, 50 years. And it's nice to have those people come back and you see them every year. You know who they are. I mean, you can make friendships from people from Texas and Oklahoma, Louisiana, all over the United States, and they keep coming back every year. I really like that. I mean, that gives a nice personal feel to the park. It's not like you're seeing somebody new every single day. You have these same people come back same time every year. That's one of the things I like about the park. I also like the natural communities. This park is almost 100% natural. I mean, like I said before, most of the development is along the river. The rest of the park is in a natural setting. Now we're in the process of trying to restore the natural communities, because if you look around, there's a lot of cedar trees that were not here 150 years ago, even 100 years ago. Most of these cedar trees you see are less than 80 years old. So it's something we're trying to restore and bring back that natural native landscape. And that's another part I like about it, because it is so natural. That's one thing. Look around here at the architecture, CCC. I mean, there's a lot of history here in this area. I mean, the Civilian Conservation Corps built the park, and a lot of it is what we're still using today. The nature center, the dam around the spring pool, the hatchery, the CCC lodge, most of the trails here in the park. So our group Camp Smokies remains of some of the buildings that they used while they was here. So there's a lot of history, a lot of natural stuff, and the people.
And with the trees, you feel like you are. You're living in the forest. You're living in Mother Nature. The wild animals, I have seen raccoon here during the days. We have many, many bald eagles who nest in the area. We have deer that come into this area. And the list goes on of all the wildlife. And so it's Mother Nature at her best. And that's pretty much what makes this place special. And it's not just the fishing that people come back here for. You talk to anyone who comes here, they'll tell you they came for the fishing, but they also come for the beauty and the rest and relaxation of being in Mother Nature.
A few miles downstream from this pristine area, a problem has emerged. Concentrated animal feeding operations are corporate farms that house massive amounts of animals in the smallest possible area. Attention has been drawn to these feeding operations over their ethical and environmental impact. The Osborne CAFO, east of the park, is the newest poultry farm that poses health and environmental hazards.
Well, primarily, especially when you're dealing with what we deal with mostly in the southwest part of the state here, which is poultry, CAFO, you're dealing with two different types of issues. First, the waste product, from the chicken itself. Like in the case of the Osborne CAFO at Roaring River, I think 65,000 chickens on a few acres of ground. That's a lot of chicken poop. You hear a lot of people talk about this in terms of if it runs off into the stream, or it isn't an if in the Ozarks, it's a when. And basically that when is every time it rains, because our karst topography and the slope of the ground puts us in such a situation where you don't get a lot of soil absorption that doesn't end up in the groundwater, which ends up in our surface waters, our lakes and our rivers. So the waste is really, really, really high in phosphorus. And that phosphorus in the streams and in the lakes creates a dangerously high, damagingly high level of algae populations. And you get these huge algae blooms that basically they eat up all of the oxygen in the water that the fish need to survive. On the other hand, the fish eat things that eat algae. So, some people think, oh, well, the more algae, the better. Well, that's not true, because at some point you get too much algae, and the algae's when it dies, it converts the oxygen out of the water. And so you have this oxygen starvation situation set in, and you have a big fish kill on your hands.
If good management practices aren't followed, waste could flow downstream into lower Roaring River. A lot of attention has been drawn to that farm because it is so close to the state park, and rightfully so. A lot of attention should be drawn to it. But there's other areas like our recharge area, which is determined to be mostly west of here in the Washburn area, where the water actually comes from, for the spring. And I think some of those places could potentially damage the system as much as, or more than the farm that's close to us. Some studies have been done. A person that works for the Department of Natural Resources that has done some dye study tests of where the actual recharge area comes from, and several places in the Washburn Prairie, sinkholes there have been determined to be, where the water does come from. So I think the whole area, the whole recharge area should be looked at, as well as places just close to the park.
Prevailing winds from this area is from the south to southwest, so any odor will be blowed away from the park. Water quality issues, by where they're at, there's some hollows. Those streams feed Roaring River, but it's below the park. Subsurface wise, we're not aware at the present time of any subsurface water that runs into Roaring River Spring. We've done some dye testing, and everything in that area does not come west of the spring. So, for all the information we have right now, no, we don't think there's going to be a big impact to the park itself.
It's the location and then the terrain that's there because of the karst soil, and it's sitting up on top of a hill, and water runs downhill along with everything else. The DNR is authorizing them to stack that manure outside in the spring of the year. They clean out the chicken houses because that's when there's a demand for the manure. So they can stack it outside for up to 2 weeks. They give them permission to spread tons of manure up there on that hillside that's going to run down in there. The Department of Natural Resources does not control that. We had meetings with the Doyle Childers. He's the director of the DNR. And I asked him the question of what's going to happen to that manure when it runs downhill when they spread it and it runs down and into the waterway. And his answer was they're not supposed to spread it when it's going to rain. So that tells you the thinking and of what they're doing. You know, the forecast for today I don't think was rain. So they can't predict when it's going to rain, so I don't think the Department of Natural Resources can either. You know, they're going to spread it up there, and we're going to have a heavy rain that's going to run into the water. Now, their answer too is that once the water becomes contaminated, and once that runoff starts going in there, we can contact the DNR, and they'll come up and check their farm and to find out if it's bleeding into there. But until the lake gets contaminated, until the river gets contaminated, they aren't going to do anything. So, you know, why not be proactive and prevent it from getting contaminated, not just go out and take care of it after it's contaminated. And when they take care of it after it's contaminated, they're going to use your tax dollars and my tax dollars to clean it up. So there's a lot of contaminated water already in Missouri, and Berry County has got more chicken CAFOs than any other county, and it's mainly because Georges has a big influence in this county. What Georges wants to do, they get to do. And our complaint is against the DNR. It's not against, it's the Osmond's farm up here, but our complaint is really not the Osmonds. What they're doing we don't agree with. But our complaint is really not against them, it's against the Department of Natural Resources. Because ordinary people, and until a year and a half ago, I thought the Department of Natural Resources was protecting our resources. But when you get involved with it, you find out that it's a political machine and that it doesn't protect.
You know, maybe I'm a little bit biased and maybe I could be even a little bit uninformed, but to the best of my knowledge, the environmental impact study on the Osmond CAFO permit that was issued by DNR, DNR did the environmental impact study. And it says that it will cause damage, point blank, which raises the question, why did they issue the permit? And as a matter of fact, they've even backdoored the permit process, gone around a couple of state judges, in order to continue them to allow construction, even though judges had issued an injunction to stop it. They just basically ignored the injunction and went ahead and let them start construction. I don't find DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, to really be all that concerned about protecting Missouri's natural resources. They seem to do a really good job of historic preservation of things that people built. But on the true natural resources side, I've never really been terribly impressed. And as a matter of fact, I even know some people who work for DNR who would tell you the exact same thing. DNR does not care about the environment.
Every purple dot on this Department of Natural Resources map is a CAFO that sits on the Roaring River Spring Recharge. Each drop of water that falls in this area has the potential to run into the spring.
We're concerned about the leaching of the chicken manure. There have been other places around here that it has been an issue. But being so close to Roaring River, there is no doubt in our minds, those of us who live here, that it's going to affect the underground aquifer. The beginning of Roaring River comes from a cave where the aquifer comes up to the surface. It's quite deep. They have put divers down there and they've had a very difficult time locating the bottom. We have no doubt that there is going to be a long-term tainting of that aquifer.
The other situation that you run into with poultry CAFOs is that the science is solid on, but the media never talks about. What happens is, in the ones where they're producing eggs, and that's the primary purpose of the CAFOs, to produce eggs, those chickens are fed extremely high levels of estrogen hormone in order to maximize their egg production, which is what estrogen does. Then that ends up via the chicken waste in the water as well, which causes the fish to stop reproducing. The females make all kinds of eggs, but the males can't fertilize the eggs anymore. And so you end up with a whole bunch of sterile fish populations, and it just absolutely destroys any sort of sustainability of any kind of wild fishery. If you're relying on natural reproduction to replenish your fish supplies, and you've got extremely high estrogen levels in the water, not going to happen. In addition to that, at some point that water is reconditioned into municipal drinking water systems, and people are drinking the estrogen.
We're the Division of State Parks. There's also the Division of Environmental Quality. They're the ones that are regulating the farm. And we feel, and our stance is, that that's what their job is, to regulate and make sure that they follow contract. And their contract says this, this, and this, and it will be a no runoff farm. And we believe that they're going to monitor that and make sure it doesn't happen. And if it does happen, they're going to levy the appropriate fines and punishments for that. So we feel like they're going to do their job, and there's nothing that we're going to have to worry about.
And it's a shame because Missouri, in southern Missouri, tourism is a moneymaker. And if we have fish kills here, or the smell from that thing is so bad people don't want to come here to Roaring River, on opening day of trout season, we had more than 3,000 people here. They bought food in town, they bought gas for their cars, they spent a lot of money here. But they're not looking at that, they're just looking at the short end of the stick. And George's, right at the present time, controls that.
It's an area that really needs to be preserved and taken care of. It's one of the areas in the state that has been determined to be one of the conservation opportunity areas where a lot of resources will go to, and a lot of people will try to work toward, preserving it.
The future will tell. If it happens and we lose this area, I don't know what is going to have to be done to bring it back again. And so as long as that exists in this area, we feel as though there is too great a potential for harming the environment. But our question here is why? Why does it have to be here? Why does it have to be near a landmark?
I am not in the least bit against agriculture. I'm a huge proponent of agriculture. But I think that agriculture can be done in environmentally sensible ways. I think that at this stage in our development as a nation and as a society, we're going to have to put a priority on those things. We don't live on a frontier anymore. There aren't vast unlimited supplies of resources, and we all live downstream. So I believe that we all have to start finding ways that make economic sense to do things that make ecological sense. I eat a lot of chicken, I eat a lot of beef, I eat a lot of eggs, but at the same time, I drink a lot of water. But we have to find a way to sensibly do all of these things instead of continuing to pit one special interest against another special interest, and somebody wins and somebody loses. Because the reality is, when we approach things in that sort of an adversarial model, we all lose.